just watched Luca the other night, and I want to talk about this movie. And also, I'll probably be saying the words wholesome and simple a lot, so sorry about that. This is the type of film that would be perfect for streaming services. To put on and just have a good time, and not have an existential crisis afterwards. This is not an Inside Out or a Soul or like other Pixar movies. I'll be talking about spoilers, but to be honest, with this type of film, there's not much to spoil. Luca is a movie set in Italy and is about a boy who's also a fish monster who works as sort of a fish shepherd, like you know those sheep shepherds, but instead of sheep, it's fish. That's basically his job. The film starts off with showing a bunch of fishermen who encounter a sea monster. It then cuts to Luca and his family, his overprotective mom, his father who's just kinda there, and his grandma who's just chill. We get a quick glimpse of how boring sea life is. Luca's just bored out of his mind, tending to fish sheep all the time. That rhymes. Luca's family is really strict with him going up surface because according to them it's scary and full of land monsters, aka us humans. Well, they aren't really far off, there's lots of monsters here. If I had a choice, I would totally jump into the ocean and never come back and land again. Even without having the ability to breathe. Okay, so one day when Luca was scavenging for some random stuff, a kid named Alberto Scorfano sneaks up on Luca. Blah 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 blah. He introduces himself and he manages to trick or convince Luca to go above the water. So of course, the next day he comes back inland because curiosity, even though his parents told him never to do that, but he did. He met up with Alberto again. They're in this island where there's a broken lighthouse and that's where Alberto lives. Alberto's this street smart kid, the type of kid in your school who likes to talk his way out of everything. Yeah, so he teaches Luca how to walk, says he invented it but he really didn't, and they do some standard fun things that kids usually do. Luca sees a poster of a Vesta on Alberto's wall and Alberto has this idea that, you can go around the world with it. And of course, Luca believes him and thinks this is his ticket to venturing outside the world along with his new pal. Luca's family catches him going up surface and threatens to send him away with his uncle, played by Borat. Luca sneaks away with Alberto to a town named Porto Rosso. This was done in the hopes of running away from his family and trying to get that Vespa. They come across this guy named Ercole Visconti? I don't know, I probably butchered that, but yeah. Who's the villain of the film? He's ironically funny, like, he's unique in the sense of the fact that he's such a cliche villain. Like, every movie has to have some backstory for the bad guy now, or movies try to make way to let the audience feel sympathy for the bad guys. Heck, there's even movies just dedicated to that. But Ercole doesn't really have anything going on with him, which makes his inclusion to this movie funnier. Like, he's just some guy who likes to win, so he competes with kids because he knows it's easy for him to win. Yeah, that's pretty much, and this honestly makes him a good bad guy for a simple movie like Luca. The pair also meets Julia, who's this girl who's very competitive and outgoing, and lives with her father. Although she's made out to be a loner, she easily tags along with the duo, making them a trio, and it's safe to say that they have really great chemistry. They're all really charming together. We also meet Julia's father, who's this really gruff and tough looking fisherman, who has a dislike against sea monsters. Oh, actually, the entire village has this grudge and hate against sea monsters. So yeah, of course, you'd expect some mischief and comedy to ensue. Over the course of the half of the movie, the trio tries to compete in some triathlon contest, but instead of running, it's a pasta eating. Of course, Ercole wins every year because he's literally the only grown man there. The trio tries to compete because Alberto and Luca finds out they need money to get a Vespa. Luca's parents also make their way to the surface to find Luca, and that's basically what the entire second and third half of the movie is all about. There's some funny and touching moments, but I don't want to spoil too much of the film for you guys. The story overall is really basic. That's pretty easy to consume. There's hints of metaphors about homosexuality and stuff, which I won't be doing a deep dive on because I'm personally not affected by them, but it's nice to see things like that, and these things will seriously impact and help other people with stuff that they're dealing with, just not me personally. But I will say the story is very, very simple. It's a slice of life movie that, when compared to other Pixar films, amount to nothing. The stakes are really low, and even when they get outed as sea creatures, the result of it wasn't much. The story just seems like the type of story that kids can make up in their head. The world is not complicated, and there's lots of things that are left unexplained, like the lore of the sea creatures. And most things just happen just because it happens. And honestly, I really like what they were doing with this. It was like an indie film that a bunch of people just made because they want to make something fun. The movie doesn't lean in on suspense, and that's okay. The story is predictable, and this isn't even on par with Pixar's best. The story succeeds in making the viewer feel good at the end of the movie. Not all movies have to have huge stakes and consequences. The characters serve their purpose well, each of them has something to give to the story, some are there for comic relief. Although, I gotta say, Julia's father is super wholesome and nice, and there's this part where he and Roberto kinda bond, and it's really, really sweet, especially when you look at the context and find out about Alberto's father. The trio has good chemistry and feel like real kids. It makes sense that Julia would easily take in these two other kids, because that's exactly what a kid would do. You know, when you were a kid and head on to the beach or playground and you meet this other random kid, and this random kid becomes your best friend for that day? Yeah, that's pretty much what happened to them. And as you can guess, it was wholesome and sweet. This movie is just really wholesome. Sometimes we just need to watch a movie that's a treat and makes you feel all nice. I've read some complaints online about how lifeless the underwater environment is compared to other movies like Finding Nemo, but I think this was done on purpose. If Pixar wanted, they could have just copy and pasted models from those movies and put it in this one, in an effort to put more life into the underwater scenes, but they didn't. I believe this was done to show how Luca views his life. For him, underwater is just boring. This is his boring everyday life. Yeah, they are magical sea creatures, but they still live boring everyday lives, and the reason why the underwater scenes are not as visually stunning as other Pixar movies is to give the audience the feeling of boredom and dullness that Luca feels every day. I don't know if I'm giving Pixar too much credit, maybe they really were just too lazy to animate scenes for this short part of the film, or was this really their intention? But I'd like to believe the latter. I believe this was done to make the audience feel how Luca feels. He's bored of his life and his environment. His youthful wonder and curiosity would lead him to go looking for some excitement and a way to get out of his uneventful life and his uninteresting environment, which would eventually be one of the main motivators that would lead him to go up surface. I'd like to add that the contrast between under the sea and the surface is so obvious. The deep sea scenes have this sense of closeness to them that gives off the feeling of being trapped. But the moment they step out of the surface, you get that feeling of freedom. You know that feeling of staying on your computer the entire day and you get out to stretch and just smell the fresh air and you get tingles of the wind and the feeling of relief? Yeah, that was the feeling that the animators captured really well every time Luca comes out of the sea and heads up surface. The first time he goes up surface, we're also treated to this nicely animated scene of Luca turning into a human, which was really cool. It reminded me of when every time Ben 10 would turn into Ripjaws, but if you put it in reverse. The art style overall pretty much reminds me of just a Saturday morning cartoon I would tune into as a kid. It's a far cry from other Pixar movies where everything seems so photorealistic. Luca's art style goes well with the type of story that they were trying to tell. The art kinda reminds me of other studios like Sony or Blue Sky. I'm sorry, Blue Sky. You have lived a long life. Rest in peace. Especially with the roundness and exaggerated features of the characters. Mix this along with Pixar's knack for little details and you have a movie that's very easy on the eyes, especially in the big screen. The ocean is dull, but the water still looks really good and smooth. The animation stands out the most, especially when there's scenes of the sea creatures turning into humans and vice versa. And also, when they finally reach a town, it's just so jolly and colorful and perfectly captures how the duo in the film see the surface world, full of interest, wonder, and beauty. It's quite rare for Disney to put out something like this, something so simplistic. It was such a treat to watch and can easily be rewatched again, especially when you're doing something else. Luca's story is really easy to consume for majority of people. It's not a perfect movie, and compared to other Pixar films, It's easily mid-tier, but it succeeds on trying to be a streaming service movie that people of all ages can watch and enjoy. Not all movies have to set up for a sequel or something more elaborate. Sometimes we just need movies to make us smile, to entertain us, and not be too complicated. Movies these days feel like there's a need to have some deeper meaning or has a quota on how many sequels it can set up. But Luca just doesn't have any of that, which was refreshing to see from a company built on franchises and nostalgic IPs. I like to think that Disney just forgot about this movie during its production, which gave the director free rein to do what they want, which amounted to a wholesome and simple movie that brings a smile to people's faces.